The polished marble floors of Capital City Hall reflected the cold, impersonal hum of bureaucracy. It was a sound Reed had grown accustomed to, a dull thrum that usually faded into the background. But today, it felt like a discordant note in the symphony of her already frayed nerves. At 32 she was an architect, a small business owner, a woman who built things from the ground up. She understood structure, rules, the precise angle of a support beam. What she didn't understand was the arbitrary cruelty of a man in a uniform. Wrong format, Officer Sterling Hayes had barked, his voice a gravelly dismissal. Slash instead of a dash. Application rejected. Reed, her mind still tracing the blueprints of her latest project, had blinked. 40 minutes in line, a week of sleepless nights behind her, and it all came down to a single punctuation mark. I can fix it right now, she offered, her pen poised. Nope, he'd said, a smirk playing on his lips as he leaned back, savoring the small pocket of power he commanded. Come back Monday. The injustice of it, so petty and absolute, pricked at her composure. I've waited for 40 minutes, she stated, her voice even but firm. It's a simple correction. That was when his gaze shifted, sweeping over her worn jeans and faded hoodie, the messy bun she hadn't bothered to tame. He saw not a tired entrepreneur but a target. People like you always want an exception. People like me? The words hung in the air, sharp and heavy. I'm a citizen, a taxpayer. I expect to be treated with respect. It was a spark in a tinderbox. To Hayes, a black woman daring to challenge his authority was a personal affront. His posture straightened, his voice rising to a menacing hiss. Get out before I make you. That's when she did it. The act that would shatter the fragile peace of the afternoon. She calmly asked, "What is your badge number?" "You have no right," he exploded, his face a mask of fury. "You're lucky I don't throw you out myself." As he lunged, she raised her phone, the small red light of the recording blinking like a defiant eye. He swiped at the device, his hand colliding with hers. The phone skidded across the marble, a prelude to the sickening crack that followed. His fist, a blunt instrument of rage, met her cheekbone. The world went momentarily silent, the hum of the hall replaced by a collective gasp. Reed lay on the floor, the sting in her cheek a blooming fire. Her belongings, scattered like the remnants of her dignity, lay around her. Slowly she pushed herself up, a trickle of blood tracing a path from the corner of her lip. Her eyes, when they met his, held no fear. Only a chilling, calculated resolve. No one moved. No one helped. Hayes stood over her, his chest heaving, his fists trembling. He had snapped. And in that singular, irrevocable moment, everyone knew it. Her fingers, steady and sure, found her cracked phone. She made a call. "Julian," she said, her voice clear and unwavering. "It's Era. I'm at City Hall. An officer assaulted me. His name is Sterling Hayes. Badge 346. Hayes, hearing every word, felt a cold dread snake up his spine. "Who are you calling?" he scoffed, but the bravado in his voice had fractured. Her composure, her unnerving calm, had unsettled him more than any scream or threat could have. Minutes stretched into an eternity. Hayes paced, a caged animal muttering to himself, his eyes darting to the frozen faces of the onlookers. Then the rhythmic echo of purposeful footsteps cut through the tension. A tall man in a flawlessly tailored navy suit strode into the hall, flanked by another officer. His gaze, sharp and commanding, swept the room before landing on Hayes. "Commander Julian Thorne," someone whispered, the name itself a harbinger of consequence. Thorne ignored the murmurs, his focus solely on Era. He knelt beside her, his voice a gentle counterpoint to the chaos. "Are you hurt?" "Era, did he?" "I'm okay," she interrupted, her voice steady despite the tremor she fought to control. "Just a bruise." Thorne rose, his movements slow and deliberate. He turned to Hayes, his eyes as cold and hard as the marble floor. "What did you do?" "Sir," Hayes stammered, his face ashen. "She provoked me. She was recording me. I thought she was being aggressive." "Shut up." The two words fell like a guillotine, severing any hope of an excuse. Thorne nodded to the officer behind him. "Get him out of my sight. Now." The click of handcuffs was a definitive, metallic punctuation to his career. "I didn't know it was her," Hayes blurted, a pathetic plea as he was led away. "I didn't know who she was." Thorne didn't spare him a glance. "That's the problem, Hayes. You don't get to choose who you respect." As the disgraced officer was dragged from the hall, the weight of the moment began to settle on the room. But this was far from over. Era's phone vibrated, a new name flashing on the cracked screen. Chief Counsel Logan. She glanced at Julian, who gave a subtle nod. Yeah, she said into the phone, her voice soft but resolute. Everything's on video. Pause. No, I haven't pressed charges yet. But I'm not sure that's all we're doing. This story, she knew, wouldn't end in the sterile silence of a police report. Not with video, not with witnesses, and certainly not with who Era Reed truly was. Lieutenant Vance, take Officer Hayes into custody, Commander Julian Thorne's voice sliced through the stunned silence of City Hall. His badge, weapon, and radio. Strip it all. Effective immediately. Internal Affairs will take the lead. I want a full report on my desk within the hour. Yes, sir, Vance responded, his expression grim. Sterling Hayes stood stiffly, shame a burning cloak around him. He watched as his identity was systematically dismantled. The badge yanked from his chest, the gun belt unbuckled, the radio unclipped. 22 years on the force, reduced to a man in a uniform, exposed by the unblinking eye of a camera. His eyes, brimming with tears, met Era's. I'm sorry, he mouthed. She didn't acknowledge him. Her focus was on Julian. Don't apologize, she said as Julian stepped toward her. Fix it. Her voice, no longer shaken, carried the weight of every unheard plea, every dismissed injustice. I want him fired. No suspension, no quiet reassignment. Fired. No pension, no ceremony. And I want a public statement. Name him. Make it unequivocally clear that this will not be tolerated. Julian met her gaze, his own reflecting a mixture of sorrow and resolve. Agreed. And compensation, she added, her tone unwavering. From him, not the department. Let him pay for this out of his own pocket. $12,000. Julian didn't flinch. You'll have it. This wasn't revenge. It was justice, meticulously constructed and demanded. Vance, Julian turned to the lieutenant, get her full statement. Interview every single witness. This needs to be clean, airtight. We do this by the book. Within 48 hours, the wheels of justice, so often slow and grinding, moved with unprecedented speed. Witness after witness corroborated Era's account. The verbal abuse, the escalating threats, the final violent act. Sterling's defense crumbled under the irrefutable evidence. By the end of the week he was fired. No appeals, no benefits, no pension. Faced with a lawsuit and overwhelming public scrutiny, his lawyer advised a swift settlement. To afford it, Hayes sold his boat and emptied his savings. The press release was as blunt as Era had demanded. The Capital City Police Department announced the termination of Officer Sterling Hayes for the assault of a civilian. Commander Thorne himself signed it, pledging full cooperation with an external oversight committee and department-wide reform training. A week later, the bruise on Era's cheek had faded, but the echo of the incident remained. She and Julian sat in the quiet of her living room, the silence a heavy blanket between them. Julian, she began, her voice soft but piercing, what if I wasn't your partner? What if I was just some random black woman trying to renew her business license? Would anyone have believed me? Would he have even been fired? Julian's silence was a confession. I want to say yes, he finally whispered, the admission a weight on his soul. But I can't. And that truth shames me. I didn't act because you're my partner, he added, his voice raw with a newfound understanding. I acted because you forced me to confront what I've ignored for too long. You didn't let me protect the system. You made me protect the people it's supposed to serve. She exhaled, a long, slow release of breath. The check arrived today. What will you do with it? I'm not keeping it, she said, a firm resolve in her voice. I don't want his money. It reeks of hate. But someone else might need it. The next morning, Era walked into the offices of Capital City Legal Aid, a non-profit dedicated to helping victims of law enforcement abuse. She donated the full $12,000. I want this to help women like me, she told the director. Women who don't have a commander in their corner, who don't have a badge to back them up. The story, when it broke, went viral. It was no longer about a rogue cop. It was about the systemic rot that allowed him to flourish and the woman who refused to be another silent victim. As Era walked out of that office, there was a new strength in her stride, a freedom in her posture. The violence of that moment no longer defined her. She had reshaped it, forged it into a catalyst for change. Across town, Sterling Hayes sat in the dim light of his apartment, a man stripped of his power, his pride, his purpose. His face was a recurring image on news feeds and watchdog sites, a permanent stain on his name. The phone never rang. His former allies had vanished into the silence of his disgrace. He hadn't just struck the wrong woman. He had exposed the brittle foundation of his own character, a man corrupted by power, now left with nothing but the crushing weight of his regret. An era Reed had shown the world what true strength looked like: quiet, unrelenting, and ultimately transformative.